The sky is never quiet. Even on the rare nights when the guns fall silent, when the tracers stop carving their poisonous light across the void, the air itself hums with a kind of dread, a vibration that lives in the bones, a reminder that we are only alive because something far worse has not yet chosen to notice us. Imagine waking up each day to the stink of oil, burned flesh, and recycled sweat. The rations taste like ashes because they are ashes, pressed into bricks and stamped with the Aquila. You chew not because you're hungry, hunger stopped being a thing you feel weeks ago, but because your body still remembers that it once needed food. That's life in the guard. Or, as some call it with a bitter laugh, the meat grinder. You stand in a trench that has been flooded 3 times this week, patched with corpses when sandbags ran out. The mud pulls at your boots like hungry mouths. Somewhere down the line, a man sings an old hymn, soft, cracked, almost like a child humming to himself. He doesn't make it to the second verse. A lost bolt takes him through the eye, and the hymn dies with him. But no one turns their head. No one reacts. We've all learned the first lesson of soldiering in the Imperium. Death is not an event here. It's just the background noise. And yet, here is the truth you were never told when the Commissar raised his voice and promised you glory for the Emperor. Death is not the worst thing you can meet in this galaxy. No, death is merciful, quick, clean. The real curse is to live long enough to see how much worse it gets. To feel your mind stretch thin under the weight of screams that don't stop. To see friends boiled alive in promethium or fed to things that should not exist. To wake each day knowing that your name will never be remembered, that all you are is one more nameless corpse to pile in the Emperor's shadow. That is what it means to be a soldier in Warhammer 40k. And it only begins here, because you think you know what suffering is, but that was only the beginning. No one is born a soldier. Not even here, in a galaxy that eats its young and spits out bone fragments into the void. We are born as children like anywhere else. Small, fragile, and clinging to our mother's arms. But the moment our lungs draw breath, our lives already belong to someone else. To the Imperium, you grow up with stories whispered in the half-light. The Emperor watches you, judges you, measures every action. It is drilled into your bones before you can even walk. Every prayer you mutter, every morsel you eat, every task you perform, it all belongs to him. He gave you life, and so you must give him your death. That's the bargain, though no one ever asks if you agreed to it. The first time the tithe came for us, I was only 9 years old. The Munitorum scribes arrived in their brown, oil-stained robes, carrying brass ledgers and data slates. They spoke in numbers, not names. This province owes 15,000 bodies, they said, and the governor nodded, because refusing was not an option. So the levy began. We lined up in the dust of the square, children and men alike. Commissars watched with pistols drawn. Priests with censer-swinging hands whispered litanies of obedience. Families clutched each other's hands one last time. Some wept. Others were silent, already hollowed out by fear. And then the sorting began. Too old? Execution. Too sickly? Execution. Too rebellious? Execution. Better to thin the herd now, before wasted rations could weaken the campaign. The rest, those of us who survived the selection, were herded onto troop transports, stamped with serial codes and stripped of names. I was no longer Merrick, son of Heron. I was Guardsman 449 Kappa. That's how most stories begin for us. Not with noble speeches, not with parades, not with banners. With a shuffling of ledgers, the scrape of a quill, and the loss of everything that made you human. You might think that was the tragedy, but the truth is that was the kindest part. Because the real horrors begin when you realize your home doesn't even miss you. The world you left behind will pay its tithe again and again, and your face will fade into ash. Your mother may light a candle, your sister may whisper your name into the wind, but the planet itself moves on. There is always another levy, another generation. The Imperium devours whole populations and calls it loyalty. Some planets are worse than others. On Krieg, they raise their children in bunkers, feeding them radiation-poisoned bread until their teeth rot. The lucky ones die in training. The rest march out of the catacombs with masks sealed to their faces, never knowing the warmth of sunlight. On Katakan, it's a different curse. There, even the trees try to kill you. They raise warriors born already scarred, hardened. Their lullabies drowned out by the screams of venomous jungle beasts. When they are tithed, they are already killers. The galaxy simply sharpens what was already a blade. And then there are the hive worlds. Mountains of steel stacked into the clouds, filled with endless laborers who will never see the sky. From those worlds come billions of recruits at a time, dragged screaming from manufactorums, handed a lost gun that will jam after 3 bursts, and told to serve. Billions every single year. The administratum calls it logistics. We call it loss. And here is the cruelest irony. Most of us don't even live long enough to see combat. The transports themselves are coffins in disguise. Cramped holds reeking of oil and waste, so tight that you sleep standing up. Air that tastes of iron and fungus. Rations that mold before you finish them. If you're unlucky, your transport slips too close to the warp. Then you see things that cannot be unseen. Shadows sliding across the bulkheads. Whispers curling through your ears like knives. Sometimes, when the doors finally open, half the regiment is already dead or insane. That's the true beginning. Not heroism, not glory, not banners fluttering in holy wind, but ledgers, chains, filth, and fear. And still, we endure it. Why? Because choice is a luxury no guardsman owns. They tell you the emperor protects. But when you stand on the assembly line of death, stamped and numbered like parts for a machine, you begin to wonder. If he protects us, why does it feel like we are already forgotten? But that thought is dangerous, treasonous. So you bury it. You choke it down like the stale ration bricks. And you keep marching. Because this was only the first chapter of your suffering, and far worse waits on the other side of the battlefield. There is no such thing as comfort in the guard. You wake each day not with the sound of a morning bell or a rooster's call, but with the crack of a commissar's bolt pistol, somewhere down the line, ending another man's hesitation. That is the alarm clock of the Imperium, the reminder that hesitation is death. The first thing you notice when you open your eyes, if you even dared to sleep, is the smell. A stew of iron, oil, and rot. The trenches never wash clean. The mud drinks everything. Blood, urine, sweat, rainwater, promethium spills. It all mingles into a brown-black soup that clings to your boots and your skin until you forget what clean ever felt like. Your rations are handed out in bricks. Thick, gray lumps stamped with the 2-headed Aquila. They say it is nutrient paste, reconstituted starch, blessed for purity by the local priest. We call it corpse cake, because it tastes like the cremated dead. You chew slowly because eating fast means retching, and vomiting wastes calories. And calories are all you have. Water, recycled. The taste of metal never leaves your tongue. Sometimes it is brown, sometimes cloudy. You drink it anyway. We line up, always in rows, always in silence. Silence is safer. Talking draws attention. And attention is the one thing you don't want in the guard. If you speak, the commissar might hear weakness. If you joke, the overseer might think you're mocking the emperor. If you pray too loudly, the sergeant might accuse you of heresy. So you learn to whisper, to keep your words tucked into the dark like contraband. Then comes the labor, digging, hauling, patching. A guardsman spends more time with a shovel than with a lost gun. Trenches collapse, bunkers cave in, walls crumble under bombardment. You are told to dig them again over and over until your hands blister and bleed. The mud eats your fingernails. Infection takes the weak fingers first. If you are lucky, the medici will cauterize the wound with a white-hot blade. If you are unlucky, they amputate. If you are truly unlucky, they leave you to rot, because your body isn't worth the bandages. At night, you don't sleep. You pretend. You lie still in your corner of the trench while vermin crawl over your legs and the cold chews through your bones. Sleep invites dreams, and dreams are dangerous. Some dream of home and wake weeping. Some dream of the warp and never stop screaming. The priests call it penance. We call it what it is, survival. Faith is part of the routine too. At dawn, the priest comes. He swings his incense burner, coughing smoke that tastes like rust. He chants in high Gothic none of us understand, but all of us repeat anyway. Not because we believe, but because not repeating means death. We kiss our weapons like relics. We press our foreheads to the Aquila painted in blood on the wall. We recite the litany of readiness, promising that our lost guns will not jam and our hands will not tremble. It's a lie. Lost guns jam. Hands tremble. But the words keep the commissars satisfied. Every so often, the commissar selects someone at random. A man too thin, a woman too pale, a soldier whose eyes flickered with doubt. They are dragged before the regiment, placed on their knees, and executed with a single bolt round. The message is clear: fear the emperor more than the enemy. And we do. But even in this endless machine of mud and death, humanity leaks through the cracks. A man might slip you a piece of dried fruit from home, smuggled in his boot. A woman might sing quietly while she sharpens her bayonet, a lullaby half forgotten. Some carve names into their lost gun stocks, names of brothers, wives, children. Others sew scraps of colored cloth into their fatigues, a silent rebellion against the uniform gray. These moments are small, fragile, and always punished. A commissar notices a smile, execution. A sergeant finds contraband, beating. A priest hears an unsanctioned song, burning. And yet we cling to them, because they are all that keeps us from becoming machines. The worst part of the routine isn't the work, or the hunger, or even the threat of death. It's the waiting, the hours stretched into years where nothing happens but rain and fear. You sit in the trench, staring at the horizon, listening to your own breath fog in the cold. You know the enemy is out there, whether Xenos, heretic, or traitor, but they do not come. Days pass, weeks, sometimes months, and in that silence, the mind begins to betray you. You imagine things in the fog, shapes, shadows. You hear whispers in the wind. You swear the mud beneath you is moving. You laugh at things that aren't funny, cry at things that aren't sad. Men start talking to the corpses they prop against the trench walls. Women start cutting tally marks into their skin just to feel something real. When the attack finally comes, it is almost a relief, because at least the screaming drowns out the silence. That is the daily rhythm of a guardsman. Not battle, not glory, but hunger, mud, silence, and the slow erosion of everything human. And yet, this is still only life at its baseline. The machinery of oppression, what truly keeps us in line, has not yet revealed its teeth. And when it does, you realize the lost gun is not your weapon. It is your leash. They tell us the Guard is a war machine, a collective of billions, all marching as one. But that is a lie. The Guard isn't a machine, it's a cage. And like any cage, it needs locks, chains, and keepers to make sure the animals never slip loose. The first and most obvious of these are the commissars. You know their type: black coats, peaked caps, bolt pistols gleaming in the torchlight. They carry themselves like executioners who never put the axe down. They don't fight the enemy, they fight us. Every regiment has them, sometimes dozens, their only duty to ensure we don't run. They speak in sermons. Courage is the emperor's gift, they say, as they put a round through a deserter's skull. Cowardice is treason. I've seen men beg on their knees, faces pressed to the mud, promising to fight harder. It never matters. The commissar pulls the trigger anyway. Mercy is weakness. Weakness is corruption. And yet, here's the irony. We love them almost as much as we hate them. Because the commissar's cruelty is at least predictable. You know the rules: hesitate and you die. Doubt and you die. Flee and you die. Simple. Clear. In a galaxy where nothing makes sense, that kind of certainty almost feels like safety. Almost. But commissars are only one cog in the machine. There are the priests too. Ecclesiarchy zealots in tattered robes, reeking of incense and sweat. They carry books bound in human skin, swinging chains tipped with nails. They shriek sermons before every charge, screaming until their throats bleed. The emperor demands your blood. He will know you by your sacrifice. Sometimes they lead from the front, chains words in hand, cutting down the enemy with terrifying conviction. Other times, they simply beat the hesitant with their censer chains, lashing men and women into battle like cattle driven to slaughter. You'd think faith would bring comfort, but here faith is a whip, a leash around the soul. Then there are the overseers and drill sergeants. You might think their job is to teach us to fight. It isn't. Their job is to break us. Every day is drills until your muscles scream. Strip the lost gun. Assemble the lost gun. Fire the lost gun. Again, again, again. They don't care if you're too hungry to hold steady, if your hands are shaking from fever, if your boots are filled with rot. Mistakes are punished with fists, boots, and lashes. Sometimes executions, too. I once watched a sergeant order a man to dig his own grave for failing to keep his lost gun clean. The man laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. By nightfall, he was lying in the hole with dirt over his face, his lost gun polished and placed on his chest like a tombstone. That was the lesson. Weapons are sacred. You are not. And yet, even all this pales beside the true genius of imperial oppression. Bureaucracy. Paperwork kills more guardsmen than lost fire. Every action is recorded. Every death is tallied. Every ration brick is stamped. Every bullet logged. Lose your weapon? Execution. Misplace your ration card? Flogging. Fail to fill out your kill forms after a battle? Penal battalion. Yes, even killing must be documented. There is a form for every corpse. The Munitorum demands records, always more records. Who killed them? With what weapon? Where was the body left? The galaxy itself is drowning in paper. And behind that paper is a truth sharper than any blade. You are not a person. You are an entry in a ledger, a statistic, a number. But cruelty does not end with rules and punishments. No, the Imperium knows the true trick of power. Make the people destroy each other. Rations are scarce, so you fight your bunkmate for crumbs. Ammunition is rationed, so you hoard and steal, betraying friends for a single charge pack. Rumors of heresy spread, whispered in the dark. You accuse first, or you are accused. The commissars don't have to pull the trigger every time. We do it for them. Paranoia is survival. Trust is suicide. And so the guard remains obedient, not because chains bind us, but because mistrust keeps us from ever standing together. Still, the most horrifying thing is how quickly you get used to it. Executions become background noise, like distant thunder. Priest screams become a lullaby. The taste of corpse cake turns familiar, almost comforting. The first time you see a man whipped until his spine shows, you want to vomit. The 10th time, you barely glance up. That's the real machine. Not commissars, not priests, not bureaucracy. Normalization. They don't just want you to obey. They want you to believe this is all there is, that this is life, that this is what humanity is meant for. But even machines break, even cages crack. And when they do, when the routine fractures and the unexpected arrives, it is always worse than anything you thought possible. Because this is the grim truth. The daily cruelty of the Imperium is not the end of your suffering. It is only the preparation for the horrors that come next. Routine is its own kind of hell, but the real nightmare begins when the routine breaks. You think you are prepared. After all, you drill every day. You clean your weapon until your hands bleed. You chant the litany of readiness until your throat cracks. You stand in the trenches, staring at the horizon, waiting for the enemy. But nothing can prepare you, because when the storm comes, it always comes like a betrayal. The first sign is usually silence. The wind stops, the rats vanish. Even the rain, eternal and merciless, holds its breath. Then the sound, not the thunder of artillery that you can brace for. This sound is alive. Screams carried on the wind, metal grinding like teeth, whispers in a language that scratches at the inside of your skull. And then the horizon tears open. Warp storms are not weather. They are wounds. The sky splits like flesh under a blade, and the stars themselves bleed. Colors you cannot name pour through the clouds, washing the land in impossible hues. The air tastes like copper, like spoiled milk, like burning hair, all at once. And from the wound in the sky, the enemy comes. Sometimes it is the traitor legions, men who were once like us, but clad in armor that has drunk too much blood. They march with the same discipline we do, but twisted, mocking. Their banners drip with skin. Their chants are parodies of our prayers. They kill not to win, but to savor. Other times it is the Xenos, the orcs, roaring with laughter as they charge headlong, eager to die just to hear the noise. The Tyranids, swarming like living oceans, their bodies blotting out the very ground. Eldar, ghosts with blades of light, slicing through us as if we are already dead. And worst of all, the demons. They don't march. They don't charge. They simply arrive. One moment, the trench beside you is filled with men. The next, those men are gone, burned into ash or replaced by things that should not exist. Limbs too long, mouths too wide, skin writhing as though alive. Their laughter is inside your head, clawing at the softest parts of your mind. You fire your lasgun until the barrel glows. You scream the Emperor's name until your throat is raw. It does not matter, because you are not fighting soldiers. You are fighting nightmares given flesh. The world itself rebels during these events. Mud rises like waves, swallowing men whole. Air turns to fire, lungs blistering with every breath. Shadows crawl where light should be, whispering secrets you never wanted to know. One time, during a chaos raid, the dead began to walk. Not as corpses, not as shambling husks, but as perfect copies of the living. Men saw themselves rise from the mud, identical down to the scar on their cheek, the tattoo on their arm. Some froze, unable to fire. Others shot their doubles, only to feel the wound in their own flesh seconds later. That battle ended with more guardsmen killing themselves than the enemy ever managed. And yet, even without the warp's touch, escalation finds us. Artillery shells that fall for days, turning night into endless fire. Ordnance so heavy the earth itself cracks. Trenches collapsing in on men who die buried, clawing at the mud for air. Gas attacks that rot the lungs, turning every breath into liquid agony. Starvation sieges where rations run out, and you watch as comrades carve strips of flesh from the dead. At first, they hide it. Later, they share it openly, offering you a slice with shaking hands. Better than corpse cake. They whisper with a broken grin. Sometimes it is betrayal. A regiment ordered to hold a line, only to discover the reinforcements never existed. High command writes your death into the plan. You are not meant to win, you are meant to delay. You realize your sacrifice is not noble, not glorious, but bureaucratic. A footnote in some general's ledger. And worst of all, sometimes it is victory, because victory is never what you think. When the enemy is pushed back, when the survivors cheer, when the priest shouts about the Emperor's triumph, look closer. Half your regiment is gone. Their names struck from the ledger, their bodies left in the mud. The survivors are maimed, broken, infected. You look at them and see walking corpses, men and women who will not survive the next march, the next battle, the next sunrise. And yet the commissar calls it victory. The priest calls it faith rewarded. The officer calls it glory. And you believe them, because if you don't, the only other option is madness. Escalation comes in layers. Each horror builds upon the last, until you stop recognizing them as separate events. Hunger, plague, artillery, warp spawn, betrayal. They blur into one endless storm. At first you tell yourself, I will endure this. Then you tell yourself, I will endure the next one. And then one day you stop counting. You simply exist. Not living, not surviving. Just existing, waiting for the next horror to arrive. And it always does. But here is the final cruelty. Escalation is not the enemy's weapon. It is the Imperium's. Every horror that breaks you also reforges you into something else. Something less than human, more than slave. A tool that can endure anything. A weapon that does not question, does not falter, does not hope. Escalation is the Imperium's forge, and we are the iron hammered upon its anvil. Yet even iron breaks. And when it does, when the weight of horror snaps the last strands of humanity left inside you, the Imperium does not let you go. No, it makes use of you still. You are sent to a penal legion, stripped of name, of face, of future, fitted with a collar that will detonate at the Overseer's whim, sent charging into the jaws of the enemy, screaming not for glory but for the mercy of oblivion. That is what escalation leads to, not salvation, not victory, but death as currency. And if death is currency, then the tools of that trade are the weapons, gear, and symbols we are forced to carry. Crude, holy, broken, mocked, these instruments of war are not just tools, they are chains. And that is where our story goes next. They say a soldier's weapon is his life. In the Guard, it is more accurate to say a soldier's weapon is his death, because you will die clutching it no matter how useless it proves to be. The lost gun, ubiquitous, crude, reliable in the same way a stone is reliable. It fires beams of red light that can, sometimes, burn through flesh. It is the hammer of the Guard, not because it is powerful, but because it is everywhere. The Munitorum loves it because it never jams, never rusts, and is cheap to produce in the trillions. They say it can fire thousands of shots without failure. What they do not say is that it takes thousands of shots to bring down even a half-decent foe. Orcs laugh as lost rounds spark harmlessly against their hides. Chaos Marines barely flinch. Tyranids don't even notice. You aim, you fire, and you hope. Not for a kill, hope merely that the enemy will be distracted long enough for someone else to save you. Still, the Lost Gun has one grim virtue, its power pack. You can recharge it by tossing it into a fire, which means that when you are starving, when your belly is empty and your hands shake, your Lost Gun is more reliable than your rations. It will keep shooting long after your body is ready to collapse. And so we carry it, polish it, pray to it. Not because it will save us, but because it is all we have. The bayonet, if the Lost Gun is a cruel joke, the bayonet is the punchline. They tell us to fix bayonets before every charge, as if a foot of sharpened steel can stand against claws, fangs, or armor forged in the eye of terror. And yet, bayonets do kill. Not demons, not Tyranids, not Chaos Marines. No, bayonets kill us. When rations run low, when ammunition is gone, when discipline collapses, bayonets are used in the dark. A comrade's throat slit for a strip of dried meat. A rival silenced over a whispered prayer. A deserter pinned to the mud by the blade of his closest friend. And so the bayonet is not a weapon against the enemy. It is a weapon against your own. The flak armor you are issued armor, too, though to call it armor is an insult to the word. Flak vest, flak helmet, flak pads. Thin plates of plasteel and ceramic stitched together, designed not to stop bullets, but to make your corpse easier to identify afterward. It might turn aside a knife. It might deflect shrapnel. But against bolters, claws, or even the fists of an orc, it may as well be paper. Yet the commissar tells you to be grateful. The Emperor provides, he roars, and so you wear it, sweating under its weight, cursing as it chafes your skin raw. You tell yourself it helps. You lie, because sometimes lies are the only armor you really have. The banners and relics, but the strangest tools are not weapons at all. They are symbols. Every regiment carries banners. Great tattered things, stained with the blood of generations. Men will die to hold them high, not because they matter tactically, but because they matter spiritually. A banner is proof that you are still part of something larger, that you are more than just mud and fear. Lose the banner and you lose more than cloth. You lose the illusion of purpose. And then there are the relics, skull icons, Saint Bones, aquilas made of gold stolen from conquered worlds. Priests lift them high in battle, promising miracles. But miracles never come. The relics are not for protection, they are shackles, chains for the soul, proof that even your faith has been weaponized. I once watched a guardsman catch a bullet meant for a priest. As he bled out, the priest told him he had been chosen, blessed. The guardsman smiled through the pain and whispered, "Then let him choose someone else next time." The priest executed him for blasphemy. The Voxcaster, and what of the Voxcasters? The bulky radios strapped to men's backs, their antennae scraping the sky? They are lifelines, we are told, voices that connect us to command. But they are also beacons. The enemy always knows where the Vox operators are. They die first. Always. No one wants to carry the Vox. But someone must. So lots are drawn, straws picked. Men pray to lose. And the winner, the unlucky winner, marches with a target painted on his back. His own heartbeat drowned by static voices whispering orders that rarely make sense. Tools of desperation, then there are the weapons born of desperation. Molotovs made from ration tins. Knives carved from shovel heads. Lost guns rewired to overcharge, burning out after a single suicidal burst. We invent, we adapt, we cling to anything that might buy another breath. One legend tells of a guardsman who killed a Chaos Marine with nothing but his entrenching tool. Cracked the giant's helmet, drove the blade into his eye, hacked until the monster fell. They say his name was carved into the regimental banner, immortalized. But the truth? He was executed by a commissar for failing to use his issued weapon. That is the Imperium's logic. Heroism is heresy if it breaks the rules. Irony in every weapon is a joke told at our expense. Lost guns too weak, bayonets too cruel, armor too thin, banners too heavy, relics too false. And yet, here's the cruelty, we love them. Because without them, we would have nothing. They are lies, but they are our lies. Tools that kill us, but make us feel like soldiers instead of victims. That is their true purpose. Not to slay the enemy, but to disguise the fact that we are already dead. And death, inevitable as it is, rarely comes from the enemy. No, the real killers are closer. Friends, comrades, leaders. Betrayal and suspicion are the sharpest blades of all. And that leads us to the next chapter of this nightmare. They tell you that the Guard is a family, a brotherhood forged in the crucible of war, that we fight shoulder to shoulder, bonded by faith and fire. But if this is a family, it is one where the knives are always out. The illusion of brotherhood in the beginning, it feels true. You laugh with your squad mates, share stories in the mud, trade bites of ration bars, and pass a flask between trembling hands. You cling to each other because there is nothing else. You whisper promises, I'll cover you if you cover me. But the galaxy doesn't allow promises. Hunger gnaws at loyalty. Fear corrodes trust. When death is certain and survival rare, every man becomes a rival. And the commissars know it. They encourage it. The Emperor protects those who are pure, they say. Report all whispers of doubt, all signs of weakness. So you listen not just to the sound of the enemy in the dark, but to the sound of your comrade's breath beside you, wondering if he will betray you before dawn. Betrayal as currency. Betrayal is the only currency left when everything else is rationed. A whisper in the commissar's ear can earn you extra rations, a shorter shift on the gun line, maybe even a night without patrol. You don't need proof, only suspicion. And suspicion is easy. He muttered before prayers. She hid her ration bar. He looked away when the priest praised the Emperor. That's all it takes. A word, a glance, a hesitation. The accused are dragged away. Sometimes they're shot. Sometimes they vanish into the black maw of the penal legions, never to be seen again. And everyone left behind pretends to be grateful, because it wasn't them this time. The cost of kindness. Small kindnesses exist, but they are dangerous. I once saw a guardswoman share her bread with a starving boy from the refugee lines. Priest saw her, called it theft of the Emperor's bounty. She was flogged until her back was ribbons. The boy was shot for tempting her to sin. Another man carried a wounded comrade for 3 days after a battle, refusing to leave him behind. When the commissar found out, he praised the man's loyalty, then executed the wounded soldier for being a burden to the Emperor's armies. Mercy is treason. Kindness is heresy. Humanity itself is a liability. Resistance still, some try to resist. There are whispered stories of soldiers who refused orders, who shot their commissars, who fled into the wastelands to escape both Imperium and enemy. Some form little bands, hiding in ruins, scavenging scraps, swearing never to fight again. But the Imperium does not forgive. When such deserters are found, They are not just executed, they are made examples. Their corpses nailed to walls, their skins stripped and stretched into banners. The priests declare their screams a hymn of warning. And yet, even then, you hear of some who escape. Men and women who vanish into the dark, who are never caught. Legends, ghosts, the dream that maybe, somehow, it is possible to slip free of the cage. Of course, most who escape are claimed by something worse. The fear of each other, so we endure. But we endure alone, even when we are packed shoulder to shoulder. Every squad is a nest of suspicion. You smile by day, laugh at jokes, trade stories of home. But by night, you keep your lost gun close, pointed toward the dark, and not always at the enemy. You know that one wrong word, one moment of weakness, could see you denounced. Better to speak nothing. Better to feel nothing. Better to be nothing. That's what the Imperium wants. Not soldiers, but husks. Bodies that move and fire on command, empty of trust, empty of self. And in the rare moments when you remember what it was like to be human, you smother the thought quickly. Because in the Guard, memories are more dangerous than bullets. The bitter irony, and here lies the bitterest irony. Even as we fear each other, even as betrayal festers, we depend on one another. No man survives alone in the Guard. You need someone to cover your flank, someone to help dig the trench, someone to whisper you awake when the nightmares get too loud. So you trust and you distrust. You laugh and you doubt. You cling to each other, even as you know the knife is always close. This is the paradox of the Guard. You cannot live without your comrades, and you cannot live with them either. And so the machine grinds on. But betrayal, paranoia, cruelty, these are still human things. Understandable, rational. You can almost convince yourself they are normal, until something else creeps in. Something not human at all. Something that whispers from the shadows, gnaws at the edges of reality, and reshapes flesh and mind alike. That is when you learn the real truth. The greatest enemy is not your commissar, not your comrade, not even the Xenos charging your trench. The greatest enemy is the warp itself. Chaos/warp influence or corruption. You can endure the lash of a commissar. You can endure hunger, mud, betrayal, and endless war. But what you cannot endure, the thing no soldier can truly resist, is the whisper in the dark. Because the warp is not just out there, beyond the veil of stars. It is inside. Inside your mind, your dreams, your flesh. The first whispers, it begins quietly. A soldier on night watch hears a voice behind him. He turns, nothing. He convinces himself it was the wind or fatigue. But the next night, he hears it again. A whisper of comfort, promising rest, promising an end. He doesn't tell anyone, because if he does, he'll be shot for heresy. So he keeps it secret. He listens, and the voice grows louder. Soon, he's laughing at jokes no one else hears. Soon, he's stronger, faster, hungrier. Soon, he is not entirely himself. That's how it begins. Not with fire and brimstone, with whispers. The madness of the warp, then the dreams come. You dream of home, but it is twisted. Your mother with hollow eyes, your father's hands dripping blood, your childhood bed sprouting teeth. You wake screaming, your sheets soaked, but no one comforts you, because they are screaming too. Whole regiments suffer night terrors together. Thousands of men jolting awake at once, clutching their heads, wailing like children. No priest can quiet them. No drug can smother it. And by day, the hallucinations linger. You see shadows moving where there are none. Hear screams in the static of the vox. Smell burning flesh when no fire burns. Sanity unravels, thread by thread. Mutation, sometimes the warp does not stop at the mind. Sometimes it reshapes the body. A soldier wakes to find his arm blistered, swollen. By noon, it is twice its size. By nightfall, claws split from his fingers. His squadmates beg him to hide it, to cover it. He weeps, begs for help. But there is no help. The commissar sees, and he is executed on the spot. If they are merciful, it is a bolt round to the skull. If not, flommers. The stink of burning flesh clings to you for days afterward. And in the silence that follows, every soldier examines his own body in secret, terrified of finding a blemish, a rash, a sign that he too is marked. And sometimes, it is not fear. Sometimes it is longing, because the warp offers power. And in a world where you are powerless, that temptation is worse than any lash. Rituals and sacrifice when fear grows too thick. Some turn to prayer, but not to the Emperor. I saw it once. A circle drawn in blood, men kneeling, chanting words that made my teeth ache to hear. They promised themselves protection, victory, freedom. They promised their souls. The next day, they fought like demons. Stronger, faster, fearless. But when the battle ended, their bodies collapsed, their skins sloughing off, their bones brittle as ash. Their screams lasted hours. The priests called it heresy. But I wondered, was it? Or was it simply the only prayer that worked? The inevitability of corruption, the cruelest truth is this: corruption is inevitable. You can scour your thoughts, lash yourself bloody, chant the Emperor's name until your throat tears, and still the warp seeps in. Because the warp is not foreign. It is you. It is every hunger you've denied, every rage you've swallowed, every grief you've buried. It feeds on what makes you human. And in the Guard, there is plenty of grief to feast upon. Stories in the trenches, we tell stories to frighten the new recruits. Of the man who prayed so hard for deliverance that his tongue split into three, each one praising a different god. Of the squad that vanished into a trench one night, only for the trench to spit them back out in the morning. Merged into one screaming, many-limbed mass. Of the priest who claimed visions from the Emperor, but when his robes were torn open, his chest bore not an Aquila, but the brand of a dark power. We laugh when we tell these stories, but it is hollow laughter, because we know they are not stories. They are warnings, and they are true. The impossible choice. So what do you do when the whispers come? When your dreams rot, your body mutates, your comrades begin their secret rituals. You stay silent. You pray louder. You grip your lost gun tighter, knowing it will not help. Some choose death, running into enemy fire, pulling the pin on a grenade, begging for the Commissar's mercy. But most choose the only thing left. They choose to endure, not because they are strong, but because there is nothing else. The warp is patient. It does not need you to fall today. Can wait until tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, until there is nothing left of you to resist. But even in the face of corruption, stories remain. Stories of individuals, heroes, martyrs, traitors, who burn brighter than the rest, even as they are consumed. And those stories, more than any relic or sermon, are what keep the Guard moving forward. Because in the end, we may not believe in the Emperor. We may not believe in hope, but we believe in stories. Legends, myths, and famous examples. Every regiment, every world, every trench has its stories. We tell them around dying campfires, or in whispers before sleep, or in the seconds before the charge. We don't tell them for comfort. We tell them because they remind us what happens when a single human stands out against the endless tide. Whether as martyr, traitor, or monster. The martyr of Let His Hive, they say in the last days of Let His Hive, when the cultists had already taken the spires and demons roamed the lower levels. A single guardsman named Karnak refused to retreat. He was no hero, no officer, just a conscript with a lost gun. But when the order came to fall back and seal the gates, Karnak stayed behind. Why? No one knows. Some say he did it out of faith, some say out of madness, some say he simply didn't hear the order. But he held a single stairwell alone for 3 days. 3 days of fire and blood, until his gun barrel melted, until his hands blistered down to bone. When they finally found his body, it was slumped against the wall, surrounded by hundreds of corpses. Cultists, mutants, even demons. His own body was torn apart, but his eyes were still open, still glaring, as if daring death itself to come closer. They built statues of him afterward. Priests called him a saint. But the soldiers who tell the story do not speak of sainthood. They speak of a man who fought because there was nothing else to do. Because sometimes stubbornness is all you have left. The betrayer of Vorten Reach, but not all legends are of martyrs. On Vorten Reach, a regiment held the line against orcs for nearly a year. Supplies dwindled, ammunition ran dry, but they refused to yield. Until one night, their commander, Colonel Stravik, opened the gates. He had struck a bargain. The orcs would spare his officers, give him power, if only he betrayed his men. The slaughter was absolute. Tens of thousands hacked apart in their sleep. But the orcs did not keep their bargain. They tore Stravik limb from limb and nailed his remains to the gates he had opened. To this day, whenever soldiers speak of betrayal, they spit and curse his name. And yet, in the darkest nights, some whisper, "Would I have done differently if offered life?" That is the poison of his legend. It makes you question yourself. The woman with the broken vox. Not all stories are about battles. Some are quieter. There was a woman, her name lost, who carried a broken voxcaster across 3 campaigns. It hadn't worked in years. Its circuits burned out, its wires frayed. But she carried it anyway. Every night, she would kneel beside it, adjusting the dials, speaking into the dead machine as if someone, somewhere, was listening. Her squadmates mocked her at first. Then they grew silent, because in her voice, they heard something they had lost. Hope. She died during a bombardment. The vox was shattered completely, her body buried in rubble. But sometimes, in regiments across the stars, soldiers swear they hear her voice in the static. A woman whispering, "Hold fast. You are not alone." No one knows if it is the Emperor, a ghost, or the warp playing its cruel tricks. But the story endures, because even a broken machine can carry a soldier further than faith. The man who laughed at demons. And then there is the strangest tale. During a battle against the servants of the warp, a guardsman, name unknown, was cornered by a demon. Flesh twisted, jaws dripping, a horror born of madness itself. Most would have screamed. Most would have died on the spot. But this man laughed. He laughed in its face, spat blood into its eyes, called it an overgrown grox with bad skin. And somehow, the demon faltered, froze, confused, and raged. And in that moment of hesitation, other guardsmen cut it down with lost fire. No one knows why he laughed. Maybe he had gone mad. Maybe he was braver than anyone else alive. Maybe, in that instant, he realized the truth, that in a galaxy this cruel, laughter itself is rebellion. They say he kept laughing until the day he died. Why we tell these stories, these legends, of martyrs, of traitors, of fools and saints, are the only inheritance the Guard has. We pass them down not because they make us stronger, but because they remind us that we were human once. That in the face of endless war, a single life can still echo. But legends are dangerous too. They make you believe you might be remembered. And in the Guard, the truth is that most of us will not. Most of us vanish nameless, unmarked, forgotten. Our bones left to rot in mud. Our names scrubbed from the rolls. Our stories untold. And maybe that is why the stories of others burn so brightly. Because we know we will never have one of our own. And so we endure. We fight. We die. We vanish. And all that remains are the stories. Half-remembered, whispered, twisted by time. Stories that tell us what we already know, but dare not say aloud. That there is no victory, only survival. And even survival does not last. Philosophical reflection and closing. What is the life of a guardsman worth? Not much. A few rations. A lost gun charge. A line of ink on a ledger that will be burned as soon as the war ends. We are told that we fight for the Emperor, that our deaths have meaning, that we are the wall that stands against the darkness. But the truth? The wall does not stand. The wall is ground into dust, rebuilt, ground again. The wall is made of flesh and bone, replaced endlessly, never remembered. The wall is us, and if we fall, another takes our place. And another, until the galaxy itself is paved with our corpses. The weight of existence. Some men think death is the end. But in the Guard, you learn quickly that death is not the worst thing. The worst thing is to live, to march until your feet rot, to starve until your belly is nothing but knives, to scream until your voice is gone, and still be ordered to scream again, to wake every morning and realize you have survived. only to wish you had not. Death is simple, quick, clean if you are lucky, but life in the guard is a slow erosion. Each day, another piece of you is carved away. Your joy, your fear, your name, your humanity, until nothing remains but the uniform, the rifle, and the number tattooed on your arm. The illusion of faith, they tell us the Emperor watches. They tell us his light protects. But I have stood in the dark of the trenches, as shells tore the sky apart, as demons clawed reality open, as men screamed for mercy, and I saw no light. If he watches, he does not see us. If he protects, his hand never reaches. And yet we pray, because what else is there to do? In a galaxy where gods of madness whisper in your dreams, the Emperor is not faith. He is a shield against despair. We do not believe he saves us. We believe he keeps us from realizing that no one will. The endless war, there will be no victory. That is the truth none dare say aloud. The Imperium cannot win. Chaos cannot be destroyed. The Xenos cannot be erased. War is not a battle to be fought. It is the air we breathe, the ocean we drown in. We fight not to win, but to delay. To hold the line one more day. To push the inevitable back by a fraction of a second. Every world saved is already dying. Every victory is already lost. Every hero already forgotten. The war is not endless because the enemy is strong. The war is endless because it is the galaxy. What remains of us, so why do we endure? Why do we march into fire, knowing it will consume us? Why do we hold the line, knowing it will collapse? Because we have no choice. Because the Commissar's pistol is at our backs. Because our families are hostages to the Imperium. Because to refuse is death, and to obey is only a slower death. But deeper than that, because there is nothing else. We endure because endurance is all that remains of us. We endure because even the smallest ember resists the night. We endure not because we are strong, but because we are too weak to stop. And maybe that is the cruelest truth of all. The final reflection when my time comes, and it will, I do not ask to be remembered. I do not ask for statues or songs. I ask only for silence. That when the mud takes me, when the fire burns me, when the warp swallows me, the galaxy does not bother to whisper my name. Because in the end, we are not soldiers. We are not martyrs. We are not heroes. We are fuel. Fuel for a war that never ends. Fuel for an emperor who never speaks. Fuel for a galaxy that does not care. And like all fuel, we burn. We burn bright for a moment, then vanish. Smoke on the wind. Ash in the mud. Nothing. Closing lines, so remember this, if you ever ask what it means to be a guardsman. It is not glory. It is not faith. It is not victory. It is waking every day in a world that is worse than death. And calling that life.